Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. First, coming to you a little bit later than normal tonight on Thursday night. I was at a great conference all day today in Kentucky and had to give a new webinar and got on the road a bit late and just got back to Champaign, drove into some very thick fog on the way home. What I was anxious to look at when I got home was the position of this trough right here. And that's one we've been discussing this week, which is going to dive in through the plains, make a hard turn here over the Mid-South, and then end up over parts in the Mid-Atlantic. And I'm going to show you what happens to that wave later on this weekend. Instead of getting ejected right here out over open ocean, we now have much stronger flow on the east side coming out of the south. And remember how we discussed how we'd have to get that trough to back up over Hudson Bay? Well, it did, and now this wave right here, by the time we get this system over the Mid-Atlantic, instead of moving offshore like I drew this arrow, it turns north and comes up into the northeast. So the impact of all of that is that while right now we've got an area in through here with winter storm watches, winter storm warnings, and also the winter weather advisories, this system, as it gets down here into parts of the south, look at that. We've already seen in northern Arkansas on Thursday night, winter storm watches showing up. Same thing for this part of Georgia, northern South Carolina. We're going to see this all spread throughout Tennessee, Kentucky, and running up into the northeast, where we currently have wind chill advisories still in place here from some pretty cold conditions. On the backside, this region in through here, strong winds, and that extends up into the western Dakotas as well. There's even a fire weather watch. So this system's really producing a lot of different hazardous forms of weather. It's the snowfall I think a lot of folks watching are interested in, so I'm going to give you the quick rundown here. The first swath coming out of North and South Dakota, right here across parts of Minnesota and Iowa. The models have really honed in on this region of having 4 to maybe 8 to 10 inches of snow in this area. We'll take a closer look in a few moments. But once this system makes the turn and gets that strong overrunning with all that moisture out of the Gulf, we're going to load this up, and there'll be enough cold air at the surface to possibly produce some very heavy snow through Tennessee, eastern Kentucky, and then running along the Appalachian Mountains, including possibly some snow across northern Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. What I'm worried about down in the southeast, though, is the threat for ice. We're going to talk in a few moments about the ice that could come out of this as we get some cold air butting up against the mountains here. But we stitch this whole next week together, and let's just get this big picture out of the way here. The ridge that's over the west keeps much of the west coast on the drier side of things. Our first system dives down like this and comes out. There's going to be a little shortwave that kind of clips right here through the Canadian Prairie after this comes over the Great Lakes. Now what you notice in this flow pattern is much of the plains into the southern plains stays dry, and there's kind of a wedge in here around the Great Lakes and the eastern Corn Belt that misses out on this action as well. And I want to talk about this area because when you look at the latest drought monitor, which was released today, while that area is not in drought, parts of the southern plains continue to show a deepening of the drought. And again, without that strong subtropical component of the jet stream and more westerly flow across the plains, we're not able to get that moisture to return far enough back out of the Gulf of Mexico, back into the west to return the moisture. So what we end up getting out of this, let's go and take a look at our change map. We end up getting that even in the last update, we've seen several places throughout the southern plains that have seen a 1-class degradation, which makes our 3-month total look something like this. And I've continued to have a lot of concern in this area as we press forward throughout the next few months of continuing to see drought develop and worsen across this region. And this is probably the number one spot I'm keeping my most focus on here. Now take a look at where this pattern's going. You know I like to cover the long range first in these videos, so look at this. By the time we get out there to day 10, that would be on the following Sunday, the 23rd, really highly amplified pattern. And you can kind of see almost like an omega block here, or at least a Rex or higher or low. I don't know. You've got this ridge with a trough that's sitting in this area. And then downstream of that, you've got a deeper trough that occupies much of the eastern part of North America and a big ridge that pushes here into the Atlantic. Now this particular flow pattern, as we see it toward the third week of January, is almost like a carbon copy of what you'd expect to get if the MJO pop back out into phase 7 in January when there is a La Nina. Do you see it? There's that big ridge pushing here, okay? We have the trough that's upstream of it and the trough that's downstream of it and the ridge in the North Atlantic. And the models seem convinced that the MJO just can't get out of this particular spot in the Pacific through, maybe the end of the third week or maybe even the beginning of the fourth week of January. And you see that the new forecast, instead of letting this thing curl on around and run off to the east, starts to curl it right back here, maybe briefly into phase 6 and back into phase 7. Now that's what's going to dominate the next 10 to 15 days in the forecast. And the models past this point aren't really sure where the MJO is going to kind of emerge after that. Take a look. This is now the new 30-day forecast of the MJO. So we know where it's going in the next 2 weeks. The longer range models are attempting to pull this back out and maybe allow it to do a reset back over toward the Indian Ocean or pop out in phase 4 or 5 over Australia. But there's a lot of uncertainty as to where this is going to be coming out later on in the month. And we expect that because when we look at what's going on across the tropics, we would expect to see a normal eastward progression of where we have good velocity potentials. That's rising air in the atmosphere. And I'm starting to get some sort of sense of that. But in the near term, we're getting a pretty strong signal out of the Pacific. Does that continue and does that last is kind of our biggest question, because we know that this La Nina is starting to continue or continuing to fade. It's going to be around for several more months, but it's continuing to fade here. And we also have the really cold water that's still in the Gulf of Alaska, which is going to impact this pattern moving forward as well. Now, when you put these big ideas together, in other words, the La Nina having its strongest grip still over here in Nino phases 1, 2, maybe over into 3, the cold water that's here, the MJO shifting around, we know historically that tends to give us a highly variable North Pacific jet that oftentimes will dive like this into the eastern part of the United States. Now, I ask myself, how long does that last over the west? Because this cold water should help push that jet stream pattern farther and farther to the south. So I'm watching atmospheric momentum. I'm watching the meridional flow across the North Pacific. That's the north-south branch of the jet stream pattern. And we get this from the latest update from today's long-range European. So this is essentially the month of February. With time, that ridge in the west seems to build, and we get quite a bit of high pressure here and drier conditions. And that's leading to a drier time period in much of California through the end of January and possibly into part of February as well. Now, the flow comes over the top of that. You can see it pushes up here in the northern Rockies, could be above average in the Pacific Northwest in terms of snow. But as this pattern dives into a deeper trough, which is common with La Nina being focused over in Nina region 1, 2. It's common with the MJO spending more time in phase 7, phase 8 in January and then into February. The pattern looks like it will eject multiple systems right here through parts of the Mid-South, the Tennessee and the Ohio Valley, and then they roll up here into the Northeast. So that keeps a pretty broad quadrant active throughout the month of February. On the temperature side of this, watch this. Instead of showing you a 30-day average, I want to kind of do this week by week. So let's come back here. There we go. Now we know that getting into the 3rd and 4th week of this month, we've got some really cold air that's going to occupy the Great Lakes and to the east. And we're going to look at that more closely in a few moments. But the pattern seems to want to give us some downslope flow at times in February. See it right here? And that westerly flow, while dry in this area, could bring in more of those warmer days. How long into February? We keep the colder air in place here. And as a lot of the cold air that you see across the west, primarily due to there's the fantastic snow coverage there. I think it is. So don't expect this temperature pattern, which is going to go cold here in the next 15 days, all right? I don't expect it to just stay in the grip of that cold air for an extended time period throughout the month of February. I actually expect a lot of variability because the typical La Nina pattern in the North Pacific is a highly variable jet. So that's your long-range outlook. That's the newest updates that I've got right now that we're watching most carefully. Now back to the details on this current system. That all hazards weather map is kind of giving us a clue on where this is going and how quickly it's going to be causing problems. I want to start by using some of our high-res models to get an idea. So if we begin this late this evening on Thursday, we already see the snow spreading out of Saskatchewan and Manitoba into parts of North and South Dakota. And there could be, in the overnight tonight, some freezing rain that happens right in through this area. So again, we've just got some overrunning of the cold air getting to the south at the surface, but warmer air aloft. But as we watch that snow shield on the back side, as the freezing rain kind of spreads into this direction, right here over basically between Lincoln and Omaha, that could be an area in the early morning hours that's going to have some very rough go of it because of this. But you see snow spreading into parts of Minnesota and Iowa. And then as we work through the day on Friday, that snow spreads and really starts to cover a lot of Iowa, pushes into Illinois, and then the rain will quickly convert throughout the day on Friday, really get into the evening hours, over to snow through parts of Missouri. We'll get some light snow in parts of eastern Illinois as well out of this. And then by the time we get into the overnight hours on Friday and early Saturday morning, it's when this system really starts to make that turn to the east. So now look, we brought in enough cold air to bring the snow to Missouri. We've now got the low pressure kind of opening up here in the lower Mississippi River Valley and snow on the back side of it. So here we are at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday. And the warm front out ahead of it, again, the transition from rain to snow is going to start off raining in parts of Tennessee. Like look at Memphis right in through here. And then there could be a shift over to snow after it passes through on Saturday night. Now this is just the beginning of this system. To take it from here, I got to flip over to our multi-model analysis with the GFS on the left and the European on the right. So you know that these two models have got this system pegged together through that time period. Let's just take you out there to 12 a.m. on Sunday. There we are. Both models have it roughly in the same position, and they begin to transition this right over the Appalachian Mountains to run north. That's what happens when that wave opens up. You saw the shortwave trough, and it opens up like this. So the advection of the vorticity is now to the north. Rather than to the east, it's to the north. When we move the positive cyclonic vorticity in the base of that trough north, the low pressure is going to follow it. Now that's going to give us some overrunning right here into parts of northern Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and that's going to be producing the risk of having some freezing rain. On the back side of it, light snow showers here, and the next system is pretty far to the north into British Columbia. So let's keep watching where the system goes up the east coast. This is now 12 a.m. Monday, 6 a.m. Monday, getting to noon on Monday, and then into the afternoon on Monday. That system from Sunday night through Monday runs up the east coast. And both models have the position of the low in roughly the same spot, meaning that the snow swaths I'm about to share with you seem to be pretty consistent on where they're going to be. Now that's good model agreement through 5 days. That's 5 days we just looked at there. And they've also got this next little clipper, both in the GFS and the European, in roughly the same position as well, coming along the U.S.-Canada border. The European's got a little bit farther north over Lake Superior. The GFS is heavier snow over this part of Wisconsin. So you see a little bit of differences there, but both models through Tuesday have that. Now after that goes through, what I'll be watching is as that low takes shape over the Great Lakes, it will drag a front in this area. So midweek next week, we're going to have to watch for this area to open back up to some showers and storms in this region. And again, that's an area that had been drier this fall and early winter. Well, as we play that on through, that front gets dragged through the eastern side of the United States, and high pressure and very cold weather comes in behind that. We're going to talk about that in a few seconds. So let's get in and take a look at these snow maps again. We'll do a little bit of a zoomed in view. First of all, this is kind of the great snow drought area, parts of Missouri, Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio. So far in the season accumulation, we can see here that there are some places in here that have yet to see the snow fly. Where I am in Champaign, that's one of the spots. We've had a half inch of snow so far. We're setting a record as to how late into the year we're getting this. Well, as you saw, that snow as it comes south first comes through parts of the Dakotas, then Iowa, and then dips into western Illinois and Missouri. Now, just looking out there, I'll just kind of play this out to, let's take it all the way out to, Sunday afternoon. This is the corridor into which we're going to watch for the heaviest snow. Now, we're looking at raw model output. We cannot look at this and say we're going to get exactly 9.5 inches of snow right here. Nope, we're just looking for that heaviest corridor of snow. A lot of times, snowfall depth forecasting is a nowcasting exercise, but we're identifying where that core is going to be. The second part of this is going to be right in through here. The models have really honed in on this part of Tennessee, getting into eastern Kentucky, that we're going to have to watch for the heaviest snow bands to set up right through this region. Okay? Now, is there the potential? Is there enough liquid in this to be producing better than 10 inches? There currently is in the models. If we just switch over and take a view more toward the east here, watch this. As we go through the day on, look at this. This is early Sunday morning. playing through the day on Sunday, getting into Monday. You see that snow spreading up the East Coast. Now, what I'm going to tell you about this forecast is we still have some uncertainty in the position of this low. Right now, the heavy snows are in the western Carolinas, in western Virginia and West Virginia, getting into parts of Pennsylvania and then into the Northeast. And yep, this is a system that's going to tap into enough moisture to put down a corridor of 8 to 10 inches easily throughout this area. So when we look at these maps, again, the stress here is that we're identifying where the heaviest snow region will be, and it's going to be coming through right at the beginning of our new week. Now, why I still have some uncertainty is because of the Ensemble Forecast track. We got this thing pinned down right here by the time we get into Saturday afternoon on its position. This is all 51 members of the European model. But then you can see that as we get here into Sunday morning, the models are kind of giving us a pretty solid look that the position of the low could be over this part of South Carolina. But some of the forecast models split this up in actually 2 different regions where the low could be. So there's still that much uncertainty with it. And that's why I'm telling you, let's not really say we know what those snowfall totals are going to be, because even by the time we get to midnight on Monday, the spread and the position of the low, is still quite large in this area. So that's going to move depending on where the low is, where that heaviest snow corridor is going to be. So I want you to be aware that there's still some uncertainty and the ensembles are picking up on it. That's why I like to look at the ensemble average, looking at the probability of it exceeding a certain snowfall depth. So this map shows you the chance of getting more than 6 inches of snow out of this system. So you've got that corridor here where we've got about a 90% chance of being over 6 inches. Do you see the uncertainty in parts of Tennessee though? That's all dependent on the timing of the cold air getting underneath this and then that warm air pulling the moisture over the top. If the timing is wrong, these snowfall amounts in through here can't be as high as the models claimed. In other words, the liquid to snow ratio was off. 10 to 1 is probably not right. Maybe 6 to 1 is right. So we're going to watch that in Tennessee. But over the mountains, getting into the Northeast, very high probability across those regions of picking up some very heavy snow. Remember, there's another component to the wintry precipitation I'm worried about. And this is what the latest European model is forecasting for parts of northern Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina for ice. There's the potential for a 1/2 inch to maybe even 3/4 of an inch of ice in through this region, which is going to be extremely disruptive. And that much ice will do a lot of damage to trees. It'll do a lot of damage to power lines. And again, this is going to be at the end of the weekend, causing major problems for the start of next week. So we need to watch all of that just very, very carefully. But again, I want to come back to that bigger map I showed you earlier. Through this system, this is the main snowfall corridor that we're expecting out of the first low. And then you're going to see here the little clipper. See the clipper coming out of parts of Saskatchewan through Manitoba, then hitting like Lake Superior. That's the second system that comes through and adds more snow on the northern side of this. That's it. That's your next week's look at total of the white stuff here in terms of precipitation. Now, we've already seen where this pattern goes by day 10, right? We've built this large ridge. There's quite a bit of blocky flow in the west. What I mean by that is a high over a low. And this trough here has been retrograding, which means it's been moving slowly to the west because of this upstream ridge that's building here. We have a lot of north-south or meridional flow. Now, the flow pattern, if doing something like this, produces a lot of convergence here. But then as it makes the turn, it's going to keep a corridor right in through here that's going to be quite active into week 2. And the latest, there we go, the latest forecast for the week 2 precipitation. Still drier in the west. That's the impact of that ridge. But with the trough diving down, this will be the area to be watching most carefully. I think the models are giving us too dry of a look in through here. I think we're going to see an active kind of Ohio Valley storm track as we get out here into that 4th week of the month of January. Now, I hinted at watching those temperatures, and there's a lot of reason for that, because what we saw, on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with the heat building into the plains, we're going to start to see a little bit different signal here as we go forward. So here's Friday's high temperatures compared to average. This is still out ahead of this system coming south here. But then by Saturday, quite a bit of cold air coming in on the backside. See that? The warm sector opens. This will be a region where we're going to watch out for thunderstorms, by the way. I should have mentioned that a few moments ago. But plenty of instability here, producing some locally heavy rains and some storms. So that cold air shifts east on Sunday. And look what we're already starting to do again. Again, this is a region we've had these major warm-ups in the plains. And every time the temperatures get that warm here, what happens is you increase the evaporation rates. We have westerly winds, we have low humidities, and we're stressing that soil. And because it is not covered in snow, the exposed soil is continuing to evaporate more water because of these warmer temperatures coming through early next week. That's Monday's highs. There's Tuesday, but look at what happens by Wednesday. By the 19th, we're starting to see the evidence of the deeper troughs developing, and this is what we have out there for day 5 through 10. A lot colder air is now forecast to come in. It's in the GFS ensemble, it's in the European ensemble, and as we get out there to day 10 through 15, this is getting us closer to the end of the month now. This is a broad region that's going to be seeing much below average temperatures. At some points in through here, like this region in through here around the Great Lakes into the northeast, we might be seeing temperatures at times 20 to 30 degrees below normal. And what's interesting about this is that this is not related to the polar vortex. The stratospheric polar vortex right now is sitting here today, and it's strong, and it's not yet been disrupted with like a big sudden stratospheric warming event to have a connection with the tropospheric polar vortex. And as we even look out there longer term with it, we see this in the forecast. It's that same story we've been talking about. The models are trying to keep the values high here, and because they're trying to keep them so high in this area, that's a strong vortex. Nothing like we saw a year ago where it was fully disrupted. So we got to keep an eye on this temperature pattern. I'm just going to put out one other word of caution here. If we continue to see the colder air occupying this part of the country to finish January and start February, we'll also have to ask when across parts of Europe do we see cold air timing up at the same time as we see this, because it could have a major impact on our northern hemisphere heating demand at that point. And that could be a significant story in not only the normal market fluctuations, but really in the energy markets. So I'll watch it all very carefully. All right. Appreciate you giving me a little extra time tonight. We'll talk to you again very soon. Thanks.